How do you save money to buy a house? I never thought I'd say this, but I finally bought a house. It's taken so long to get to that point, and it feels really good. In fact, until the moment I got the keys and entered the house, I think I still didn't believe that I would ever own a house. In the UK, it is just so expensive. It's crazy. Compared to other countries, it is just mad how expensive houses are. So I've got 8 tips on how to save to buy a house, some of which I did, some of which I wish I had known, or some of which I wish I had done more of. So the first tip is to set yourself a monthly savings goal, and you've got to work backwards. So you've got to calculate how much you need to borrow, and you can do that with mortgage calculators. So first of all, think about what kind of house you want to buy, where, what you may be able to afford in the future. That gives you a little price tag, right? Then you can put that in a mortgage calculator. So however much the house is, £200,000 say, put that in the mortgage calculator and it will tell you what deposit do you need. So when you buy a house, you need usually a minimum of 10%. So that's £20,000. That's your savings goal already, £20,000. Then on the income side of things, you can usually borrow 4.5 times your income. So if your income, let's say, was £20,000, you can borrow £90,000. If your income was £40,000, you can borrow £180,000. So it goes up. So you've got to times your income by 4.5. That's the mortgage you can borrow. And then you need to save the deposit, which is 10%. That's in general. There are some extra fees, but we won't worry about those. So when you're setting a savings goal, you need to keep that big target in mind and break it down into months. How much can you save each month? And that's what you're going to be strict to keep to. Step 2, cut back to save. It's really painful. It takes a long time. It feels depressing, like you're not getting anywhere. But every month that you can save, you're slowly moving towards that goal. Look at your bank statements. There's all sorts of clever apps these days which can do it for you. Look for areas that you can save, cut back. Where can you reuse your food at home? Where can you cancel subscriptions? Where can you switch to free options like cycling instead of driving? For example, I lived off yellow stickers for a year. So I went to the supermarket and every day, all I bought were reduced to clear yellow stickers. That helped me save over £3,000 in 1 year. When I rented in London, I cycled. That was for 10 years. So I didn't get public transport, cycled for 10 years. Lots of things you can do. Get creative and stick to it. Tip number 3, these didn't really exist when I was starting out, but now there are so many of them, and that's budgeting apps. So you've got Emma, Monzo, Starling Bank, all of which can help you save. They can either automatically put money into a savings pot, but what you shouldn't do, what I don't really like, are these savings apps where you have to pay to save. The 4th tip is probably the biggest thing that's going to help, and that, unfortunately, is to get a second job. So for years I've had second jobs, and it's either at the weekend, you might be working, or in the evenings, you might be working, or from home, online, or just any sort of side hustle. It's a lot easier to make an extra £50 than it is to save an extra £50. And remember, just keep telling yourself it's temporary to save towards your goal. Number 5, and that is to buy with someone. This is probably the biggest of the lot, the biggest thing that will help you buy a house. I don't think I would have ever bought a house potentially if I hadn't met Lady Deals, my partner, and we pooled our resources and did it together. As soon as you buy a house with someone, you're doubling your income. So that income times 4.5 amount, it becomes much more achievable. As soon as you're with someone, saving up for the deposit really helps. Maybe they've got 10 grand, you've got 10 grand, amazing. Suddenly you got 20 grand, enough for a £200,000 house. It can really, really help. Buying a house by yourself is just double as hard. And when you think about it, part of the reason that house prices are so high in the UK is because most people do buy together. So you're fighting against all these people who have doubled their incomes and doubled the deposits and therefore can afford double the amount. That's kind of keeping house prices afloat. Tip number 6 is to save into a lifetime ISA. You have to be older than 18, younger than 40, but you can put up to £4,000 a year into this lifetime ISA, and the government will give you £1,000 for free. So do this every single year or as much as you can. And if you don't put in can't afford £4,000, put in anything and the government tops up 25%. The thing is, the lifetime ISA can only be used to buy a house or to retire. So once you put it in, you can't take it out unless you're going to buy a house with it or retire with it. Tip number 7 is to think about renting somewhere cheaper. So if you're in a big city, it's always cheaper to move out the city and live in the suburbs or out in the country. Think about whether you can switch to a remote job where you could work from anywhere. Could you go and live somewhere cheaper, pay less rent, still have a job and an income, and therefore save more towards a house? What you don't want to be doing is renting at top market prices in the central London, central Manchester, central Bristol, and paying all your money to rent rather than saving up for your own house. And 8th, my last tip, is to think about shared ownership. This is a different type of mortgage and it's only available on new build houses. And this is where you buy up to 75% of the house and a lending provider or the government owns the other 25%. And what you do is you pay a mortgage for the 75%, but you also pay a bit of rent on the other 25%. It can help you get on the housing ladder if you're struggling to reach the 100% type of mortgage. Guys, these are my 8 tips. Let me tell you, buying a house is difficult. Anyone who says it's easy is lying to you. It's gonna take hard work. It's going to take a lot of savings. But once you get there, let me tell you, putting in the key, walking to your own home, it just feels good. There's this nice peace feeling and that nagging that every month when you're paying your rent and you're like, oh my God, and it's going to someone else. Even though that continues because you're paying a mortgage, which could even be more than your rent, even though that continues, that like horrible feeling that goes with it isn't there. It's really hard to describe, but it's like just that negative feeling around paying rent just vanishes. Even though the bank is still getting lots of money from interest rates and all that jazz, owning a house is worth the hard slog. It took me over 10 years to save towards it and to buy a house, to meet my partner, to pool our resources, buy a house together, but it was well worth it. Deal Hunters, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more. Deal Hunters, I'll see you in the next one.